Welcome to the Explorers Podcast with Ken Bowen. Here, Ken connects with friends and peers to discuss issues in the world and practices to improve one's biblical perspective.
Malcolm and I were just talking, Steve, about the whole idea of the realms, the three realms of beauty being the world, the beauty of God's world, which points, in my view, to the truth of God's word.
Yeah.
And so it's the back door to the Bible. And then that in turn points to the goodness, which is in effect as well our response to the world and to the word, in the arts and in music and in sciences and so forth, and worship. And so that realm of wonder. So what we're planning to do at the Museum of the Bible is to actually use that capacity, the technologies they have, to invite people to have an encounter with the beauty of the created order. Because in our culture, as you well know, people are turning away from the word, but they're still having a hungering and a desire for imagination, for beauty, for wonder,
and for
for
beauty.
awe.
Well, you've got that lovely song, Steve, haven't you? Why do we hunger for beauty?
Hunger
for beauty, yeah. That was a real key thing. I mean, that's been very much part of my own vocation as a poet, and as a poet who often reflects on and draws from Scripture, is that you're trying to make something as beautiful as you possibly can. And of course, it's all over the place in Scripture. I mean, there's so much effectively poetry in the prophets and obviously in the Psalms and Song of Songs and so on. So, it's one of the reasons why I think, as far as is possible, Bible translations also ought to be beautiful. They ought to be resonant and and sonorous. Anyway, so with that conversation, Steve, you didn't miss it. I was just saying about how I enjoyed my visits to the Museum of the Bible when I was there doing things with the Gettys.
Oh, okay, so you've seen it.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's fantastic. I had a chance to look all around it. Obviously, being a bibliophile, I was really interested in the medieval manuscripts and the early things. But there are some fabulous, there are papyri and all kinds of things. But there's a very beautiful sort of immersive thing you go through, which is the kind of arc, the great kind of salvific narrative arc from the Old Testament leading to Christ.
Yes, that narrative.
And there's
arc.
A fantastic bit where they have like the burning bush, as it were, and you have that sense of the awe of the burning bush, and you move through. You get a real sense of the shape of the story.
Right.
That's right.
Because so many people, if they just, in sermons, you just get a bit of the Bible here, a bit of the Bible there. You don't see, as it were, the great narrative arc.
Yes.
But I thought there were some very good exhibitions there dwelling on that.
Yes. They've been very creative. So I'm now working with them on actually redesigning a part of the space, one of the spaces. As I'm a scientist, as I'm a kind of a generalist as well. So I'm more of a philosopher of science. But my desire is to open up the realm of the microcosm, the biosphere, the midicosm, and the macrocosm. And to have experiences whereby they are having a sense of wonder and awe and immersive encounters with things, and using new technologies to draw people, because I'm a big believer in using digital technology to draw people to the greater wonder of the analog world.
No, it's very beautiful. Funnily enough, that macrocosm thing, I've been exploring that in a different way. I'm writing this series of ballads about King Arthur. And I've got these things when Merlin is sort of nurturing him. And I have a whole section, which is essentially a riff on the opening of Psalm 19, that the heavens declare the glory of the Lord and the firmament show forth his handiwork. And I have them up on this sort of stargazing tower. And it's all about restoring the sense of wonder, and then thinking, if there is that beauty and order out there, and if I'm made by the word, then there is beauty and order in here too, if I can.
That's correct. Yes. It seems to me that, in fact, beauty ought to point beyond itself. We're all exposed to beauty, but not all wonder. And creating
there's a place where you see that really magnificently in a simple way, is the creation scene in C.S. Lewis's The Magician's Nephew.
Yes,
where they're all present.
Yes,
as Aslan sings the Narnian cosmos
into being. Yes, I was just
and they
reading it
see
out loud.
the stars. And there's a great moment where Frank the cabbie, who's this ordinary Cockney bloke, sort of looks up and says, "Glory be, I'd have been a better man all my life if I'd known there were things like this.
I've just
So
used
you get
that
this
very
immediate move
phrase. Yeah, that's
from beauty to goodness.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because it's something that I now use as a kind of a hint of home. I'm having that eternal perspective in this temporal arena is the part of the embedded narrative in which we are living, and so having a sense of wonder, but not all one go beyond that to curiosity and ultimately to submission to what it's the claims that this world has on our lives that are transcendent. But it seems to me that I think people can develop a greater acuity, a capacity to see by training and habituation, so that they're able to see more than they otherwise would be able to see.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's turn to what we're, I mean, you must brief me as to what we're achieving on this and what you want to.
Well, first, Ken, so before this, Ken, I think we've met. Did you do a convene? Like, do you know those people?
Yes, I just did something in Chicago for Convene.
No, this would have been years ago, about a decade ago. I was down in boy, where was it? San Francisco or San Diego? No, not San Diego, but I think you spoke at it. I'm looking at your face.
I may well have done that. I think I did something there.
Okay.
In that. It's about a decade ago, though. As well. You're quite right. Yeah.
Okay. So
long memory there, Steve.
I'm sure you're the guy that I remember, and I kind of remember your face, and
Yeah, our perception of the passing of time. I don't know about you, but for me, age conspires with God. It's a conspiracy, I tell you, in which it's designed, or actually, to me, I think of aging as a negative sacrament. It's an outward and invisible sign of an inward and invisible disgrace. And given that idea that it's designed to actually draw us into an understanding that we're not home, we're pilgrims, sojourners, strangers, aliens, wanderers, exiles, and all those metaphors of that brevity of the earthbound journey is, in my mind, inviting us to see what the real purpose of life is. Yes, but I would have been a better man if I'd known there were things like this. I just used that in my teaching just the other day.
Right. Well, there you go. It's one of my favorite moments in Narnia. I like Frank the Cabbie as a character.
I think he's
the Cabbie becomes a king. It's great.
Yeah, becomes the first king. It's an astounding thought that all those things, all this potential, and the ordinary, and the splendor in the ordinary, and seeing that as well. Of course, in the Great Divorce, when you see this woman who has this retinue of people who are preceding her, and there's an ordinary woman who would effectively be overlooked. It's like
it's very funny, because when he sees it, you can tell he thinks it's going to be like the Virgin Mary or something. And George MacDonald says, yes, it's Mary Smith of Golders Green.
Golders Green, exactly.
And she swallowed all these cats and dogs, because even the animals were sort of blessed by her. Yeah, it's very good.
So in my own process in my imaginative journey, I'm now trying to use my imagination as an organ of meaning, just as reason is an organ of reality. And in my mind, attention is a moral act. That what we attend to, what we train ourselves to see, what we become open to, and then actually develop a visual and epistemological acuity that invites us to see our connection with much more than we are, and realize the sense of humility on the one hand, but dignity on the other, so that we have this great, extraordinary, tensioned interplay that we see in a fallen world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great thing that I think Simone Weil says that, doesn't she? That attention is the great.
We live in attentioned interplay, and only the scriptures, as you well know, give us an answer to the fact that it's not we who have God who's done this. We changed ourselves. We changed we're not as we were meant to be, and the underwriting of in the incarnation of our own, in his solidarity with our human condition, is so profoundly extraordinary, taking on our own weight of glory, as it were, and bearing that on our behalf. And so the double imputation, the concept of the very principle that led to our condemnation, which is imputed sin. Now God doubles it. And in the deeper magic from before the beginning of the world, we have a deeper magic that says, no, there's something bigger than that. I'm going to take the very thing that condemned you, imputation, imputed sin. I'm going to double it up. I'm going to have imputed righteousness. I'm going to give you God's going to impute that sin on me. And I'm going to impute my righteousness on you.
That's great. It's very, very pithily summed up by Paul when he says, he was made to be sin who knew no sin, that we might become the righteousness of God.
Yes, yeah. He made him who knew no sin to be sin on our behalf, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. So the 2 Corinthians 5:21 is an astonishing summary of that.
It's one of those kind of mind-blowing moments.
Yeah.
Anyway, so as I say, I'm looking forward to coming with Steve to the Museum of the Bible. I've done it with the Gettys, but I've not done it with Steve. And, it's an amazing place. You'll enjoy it.
So with that growing apprehension of the natural component of the world, using that facility to point, using beauty as the back door to the Bible, as it were. And so it becomes a vehicle by which, because people are in our culture, not drawn so much to the Bible as they are to beauty. Although,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And
I think that is one of the ways beauty, all beauty in nature, beauty in other people, is one of the ways that God woos us. I think,
I think so.
He shows us.
us.
Again, I think, knowing Steve's songs, Steve and I would both, I think, say that beauty was one of our sort of major themes in a way.
Oh, for sure. 100%.
It makes complete sense. Yeah. And so as I'm getting older, I'm processing and using my imagination for what will, for example, we see that we have this intriguing outside-in dynamic whereby we use our sensorium to apprehend the invisible, the unseen. And so the concept of using our senses to do that, and that's the using the world in that respect, but then the word is inside out. So that it's the word becomes flesh. And so there's a reciprocal relationship between the outside in and the inside out in that dynamic. But
that's partly what the Archbishop Coleridge, in his essay on poetry, considered as a fine art, he said, to make the inner outer and the outer inner. That is the essence of genius in the fine art.
Precisely so. And so it then becomes a mutual respiration in which the two reciprocally enhance one another, and all of nature's respiration. So the more we look at this world, the more we see the genius of the one who made it. And I want people to marvel, to wonder. I want them to have I'm actually inviting people into what I call the second naivete. The first being the childishness. I put away childish things, yes, but we don't lose our childlike. We want to become childlike.
The childlikeness, yeah.
And I define what's that? Yes, it's the inability of being bored.
Absolutely. Well, do you know? You're talking about attention. Just to quote my favorite poet again, Coleridge, when he says he tries to look back and see what he and Wordsworth thought they were up to when they wrote the lyrical ballads. And he said that what they were trying to do was to awaken the mind's attention and to remove the film of familiarity that customers put over everything.
There we are.
That we see it completely fresh again.
Yes.
I think, this is why, going back to my own trip through the Museum of the Bible the other year, I was really interested at how central in the sort of walk through the story experience that I went through, how central the burning bush was, because that seems to me to the paradigm of that Moses' attention is caught. He turns aside from where he is and he sees the bush, and it's still a bush, it's not being consumed. And yet he sees it radiant and resplendent with the presence of God. And that seems to me to be one of the things in there, not like that prime miracle that God does, but in a manner analogous to it.
Yes.
That's what songs and music and poetry can do.
Yes.
They can reveal heaven in ordinary.
Yes, they become epiphanies and encounters. I had such an experience, for example, in nature. One of the things as a scientist I love to do is I use the analogy of of metamorphao and the butterfly with the moving from the eggs. And I have a whole collection of just butterfly eggs that are exquisite and beautiful. And we're going to be actually featuring that in this exhibit. We're going to be doing possibly at the Museum of the Bible as well. But then when it becomes the larva and the caterpillars and having various instars where they kind of move from one to another in several stages, and then as suddenly in the pupa, it forms its own burial chamber. And what I didn't know was until some years ago, I had this extraordinary experience where I realized that the caterpillar, we see that it creates its own cocoon. It's not a cocoon, that's for a moth. It's a chrysalis for a butterfly. And in that, he creates his own burial chamber and then liquefies and then becomes an entirely new body plan. So this curious leaf munching oddity and wonder becomes instead this nectar drinking flying glory. And so for me now, I don't know about you, but I find that metaphor is it's used in 1 Corinthians 15, where it's like a seed. So if I see it this way, then this body that we're in is the caterpillar compared to our resurrected body, which is the butterfly. And there's only one butterfly right now, but I know him, but I haven't seen him yet.
Yeah, no, that's very good. I think that the fact that you find such natural phenomena also to be metaphors,
that's right,
is the key to the whole thing. It's the key to the nature of the creation. If you believe that the creation comes forth from the word, the logos, then it's completely drenched in meaning and mind. One way of understanding it is to think of all of nature as the thoughts of the logos, as it were, expressed in creation. And therefore we should expect, as with anybody's writing or conversation or art, we should expect it to be beautiful in itself, but we should expect it to be full of meaning.
Yes.
And it seems to me that one of the problems, this is something that, writers like Ian McGilchrist have pointed to as well, is that we've got so good at analyzing the physical composition, and we've almost completely lost the ability to see the meaning. But, again, I keep referencing Coleridge. Coleridge was a great friend of the early scientists, in fact, particularly of Humphrey Davy, who's the kind of, fellow of the Royal Society who's really founder of modern chemistry. And he used to go to his lectures, and Coleridge once said to his friends, he said, "I'm off to one of Humphrey Davy's lectures to increase my stock of metaphors."
There we are. It's a metaphorical garden. It's resplendent with metaphorical wonders and beauty. If we have the eye, in my view, nature is so sacramental that everything that he's created, even though it's fallen in this world, what will it be like when because I believe, by the way, that this is a caterpillar cosmos.
Oh yeah.
And we have caterpillar imaginations, and it's going to be a butterfly, but and therefore our experience of time and space will even be in a new order of physics, actually doxological. It will, instead of taking our lives away, it'll actually be like a cat purring at our feet, and we'll, instead of time removing and diminishing us, it'll be a pool in which we luxuriate and swim, and zooming down orders of my fond desire as a scientist is to zoom down orders of magnitude and to zoom all the way down and zoom all the way back out. What a ride that'll be. And if it's not that, it'll be something better. Yeah. I don't have the imagination for it. Yeah. So that's the glory of what we're pursuing. And you're quite right. In fact, the images of the natural world are so profound that they invite us to use our imaginations. But again, everything in the created order points beyond itself to moral and spiritual truth for those who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. So if that's true, attention, as I say, is a moral act.
For sure. So this thing that we're doing in coming up, I just kind of went on because my manager I haven't actually kind of looked at this. So it's a couple of days, is it?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's January 31st and February 1st.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got that in my diary. Yeah.
And
and it's going to include a sort of concert performance from us, isn't it? We're going to, use what Steve and I do is this sort of a kind of conversation of music and poetry. You know, I'll read a poem and Steve will respond to it with a song, or the other way around. And we'll often pursue certain themes. I mean, I was thinking about this show that we're going to do at the Museum of the Bible. One of the key elements, as I foresee it, I mean, Steve and I have got to put our heads together on this for the specifics, but we've both got a substantial body of work on the Psalms. I've written David's Crown, which is a kind of prayer diary of it that we're reading. So it's a series of 15-line poems responding to all 150 Psalms. Steve has a Psalm album where you've been responded to various Psalms in song, but you've also written kind of bits of commentary on them, haven't you, as well?
Yep.
So I would imagine that a kind of core part of what we would do, given that we were in the Museum of the Bible, would be really to almost to start with the Psalms. I mean, the Psalms are literally right in the center of the Bible. You know,
that's right.
I sometimes think that what the Psalms do is, you know, whereas Exodus and Kings and all tell you the outer life of Israel, as Israel is called, and all that, the Psalms give you the inner consciousness experience of being part of that, what it feels like from the inside, as opposed to all the things that happen on the outside. And
I think that's right. And that's why they're set to music, and the whole antiphonal choirs that they were involved in. You know that the music goes below the waterline and deals with the realm of emotion and those realms of from the heights of joy to the depths of despair, and the honesty of those psalms and doing that. So only music, I find music amplifies that, and I've seen what you both have done together.
Okay,
and it's a wonderful synergistic unity and diversity where the total is greater than the sum of the parts.
Okay. Good. Yeah. Oh, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Are we on so are we doing our own thing sort of on the Saturday night? Is that what's going on, or?
I don't know the details of the schedule as yet. I think I have to look and see, but I think that's right. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that you'll be doing it on that Saturday night.
And then some on the. It looks like there's maybe a smaller things on this Friday night or something.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm not sure about the details of that, but it's going to be an encounter with the sense of the majesty of God. So I want to encompass then that whole realm of both the natural and the aesthetic beauty.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, one of the things that could be quite fruitful if it was, and apart from when we are, as it were, doing this, I hope, beautiful performance together, you know, actually having the kind of conversation like this, a discussion, a leading in questions, a drawing on our own reflections as Christian artists in different disciplines who've nevertheless found a way of working these things together. You know, I think we'd probably both have, just as we have in the course of this conversation, would have reflections to offer. I guess particularly, again, because it's the Museum of the Bible, you know, our responses to Scripture.
Yes.
Because, you know, just as Lewis says, you know, that reason is the natural organ of truth, but imagination is the organ of meaning. Yes. I think therefore we have to have an imaginative response to Scripture as well as a rational response.
That's correct.
And clearly Jesus, in telling the parables of the kingdom, is precisely appealing to the imagination. Yes. And indeed, he appeals not only, as it were, to the poetic imagination, but I think also to the moral imagination. Yes. I mean, if you think of, as it were, a golden rule, like, you know, do unto others as they would have you, as you would have them do unto you, that involves an active imagination. In order to do that, you have to imagine yourself as somebody else.
Yes,
at the receiving end of what you do.
Precisely so. The integrated connection between them, my soul, kind of a melding of souls, as it were.
Yeah, and you have to do that. And I think that's why the arts, even if they're not specifically Christian arts or labeled, I mean, the art of the novelist or of the filmmaker is precisely to get you out of your own skin and inside somebody else's. And that, I think, develops, if you like, the muscles of the moral imagination.
That's correct.
Even if we don't happen to agree with the particular, you know, tenor or belief of the filmmaker, that doesn't matter. If we once achieve identity with another, such that we see the world from the other's point of view, That is a fundamental aspect of moral imagination. And what I would hope when I've finished reading a novel, or whatever, is that I go out from that engagement with an art form and I'm more able to see the world through other people's eyes, which is the foundation of any kind of moral action in the world.
Yes. Yes, I think each person is a unique bearer of the Imago Dei in such a way that there's a kind of a synergistic unity and diversity in which I kind of think of it in terms of just our vision. When you think about binocular vision, where you have the two eyes, because you need the two eyes, and that's enough to have enough parallax so you have the depth of field. So there's a cognitive depth of field as well, in which there's a stereoscopy of cognition, in which the other person brings another thing, and I see a thing in them, they see a thing in me, and the total is greater than the sum of the parts. And the beauty of this is that no two of us will ever reflect and refract the image of God in quite the same way.
Yeah, that's when Lewis wrote a little poem as the sort of epitaph after Joy, his wife, died, he says effectively, lying here in this grave until she wakes is not just a woman, but a cosmos. The stars, the way she saw them, life as she experienced it. Each of us is an individual perceiver and refractor and shaper.
That's right.
With God of his world. So to see it completely, we need everyone. We need all of each other. One of the things that there's a fantastic bit about heaven in one of John Donne's meditations, where he talks about it as being like a library where every book will lie open.
Yes.
As if we were people. And I would imagine that in the heavenly mode of being, we would be able, quite literally, to kind of compare cosmoses, as it were.
I think so.
I'd really have. It's like Leonard Cohen saying, "Let us compare mythologies." But that I would get to have the full Steve Bell experience, and Steve would get to have the full Malcolm Guite experience.
Yes.
Now we already have a foretaste of that because we collaborate as artists, because we have a shared faith and a shared vision, because we've actually worked together in shaping a single song. We're actually already, if you like, melding.
Yes.
Well,
the two is greater than it's more than the sum of the parts. Yeah. So there's a synergistic, creative, artistic unity, but it's oriented around the same pole, around that star of truth. But each of you will see it from a slightly different angle. And then the depth of field that's caused by the conjoining of the souls, in my mind, brings that out. I think you're referring to the Meditation 17 by John Donne. And
I am, yes.
I'm thinking about, did you ever see the movie 84 Charing Cross Road with Anne Bancroft and Anthony Hopkins?
I didn't see the movie, but I read the book.
Yes, it's a wonderful, and she, though she's an atheist, she quotes Donne, and particularly all mankind is of one author and of one volume. When one man dies, one chapter is not torn out of the book, but I love it, translated into a better language.
So good.
Every chapter must be so God employs several. I love this beauty. Some pieces are translated by age, some by sickness, some by war, some by justice. But God's hand is in every translation, and his hand shall bind up all our scattered leaves again for that library where every book shall be open to one another. I love that.
Yes, that's
just
fantastic.
That's devastating.
It's funny because that's the same meditation that has "No man is an island" and "Do not pass for whom the bell tolls." Everybody quotes that at the beginning. No. But they miss this fantastic thing.
They miss that earlier portion, which to me is glorious. And so I think about how each one is going to be opening up to the construal of another, and then we're all amplified collectively. Right now, we're so limited in a fallen world where we only have so much capacity to relate to so many people. But in this world without pain, sorrow, disease, and suffering and death, in a resurrected realm, we will be contemporaneous, I think, with all these people at once. Whereas right now, and we depend on great art and literature and music and poetry to draw us into the sense of being contemporaneous with a person that we don't currently know or haven't yet met. But the genius of the art is to make the person so real, to reify them. in a way that it's anticipatory joy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that.
Well, this will be great. Hey, Ken, are you speaking at this thing, or are you doing?
Yes, I'll be speaking at it too. I'm going to be doing a thing on Thomas Cole. I have a book that I wrote, which is on the Angel and the Voyager, where I'm looking at the Cole's wonderful portrayal of the voyage of life, birth, growth, decay, and death, and also comparing that with the course of civilization. And he does the same metaphors. So we're just looking at that whole process of the aging process, which is designed ultimately in this world to draw us to a greater anticipation of an eternal perspective in this temporal arena, in which all shall be well and all manner of thing will be well. So, in my mind, that's the glory of it. For me, I'm struggling with so many things in this world that we struggle with as we see the diminishment, the sadness, the sorrow, the loss of people that we love. I'm old enough now to see that more and more frequently. And my solution is not a left-brained orientation, which is a good servant but a poor master, but rather a right-brained orientation to the intuition of what's to come, a greater good, a greater beauty, a greater glory.
I agree with you. And I think that's one of the reasons why, actually, I think in all great art, alongside the beauty, art in a fallen world always has an element of elegy. Yes. There's always an element of. So just want to throw this. I think we always find the passage of time, the loss of things through time, somehow unnatural. And that's, because he said eternity in our hearts. So just as an instance, when I was writing my sequence of poems, David's Crown, in response to each of the Psalms, obviously there are lots and lots of ways you can if you take a famous Psalm like 137, by the rivers of Babylon, we sat down and wept, when we remembered Zion, we hung our harps on the trees. And obviously there are historical and political ways of thinking about. There's lots of ways of thinking about that, But I actually, when I came to write my own meditation on it, what I thought of as the rivers of Babylon was the river of time itself. The fact that we keep losing things, that they keep flowing. So I'll read it to you. You might enjoy it. So, Super Flumina by the rivers. That we might find in Christ complete assurance, we still recall these stories of the past, for in them is the pattern and persistence of our long exile from the things that last. For we live super flumina. Time flows away from us, and all we prize is lost the moment we attain it, like the rose that shows eternity yet fades and falls. So all our songs and music still disclose the tragedy of time. The voice that calls us from eternity must always make an elegy. We beat against time's walls, for this is Babylon. Our captors take the best in us the moment it is born. But Babylon will fall. We will awake.
We will awake. So there is the joy.
That sings,
comes in the morning.
I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay, go ahead. One of the things I like about reading poems to Steve is that, like, 2 days later, he comes back with a song.
He's got a song for it. Yeah. I could see a moment of inspiration in you there, Steve.
That's funny.
But it's a lovely thing to see how the Lord brought you together in a synergistic unity and diversity. Again, the total being greater than the sum of the parts.
And if we do some part of what we do with the Museum of the Bible over those 2 days, might be a conversation between us. We could perhaps tell the story a little bit about how we met and how that happened, because it's full of happenstance, if you like, and coincidences that are God incidences. And it's only from the perspective of where we are now that we can look back and see God's hand in that.
Right. For sure.
Oh,
but it's kind of funny because, like I always feel, Malcolm, you must feel this. I always feel like I don't have another song in me. I always feel that. you know.
Yeah, that's right.
But the minute, like, just those last two lines, I kind of go, oh, there it is, right there.
There it is. There it
I
is.
don't know what I'm doing tonight. Like, it's there's the little rabbit runs across my trail, and I'm off like.
Okay. Well, if you've got the David's Crown book, it's number 137.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's true. I do. I mean, one of the things that's, if you do something and you realize that part of what you do has come, if you like, as a gift and inspiration, more than you deserved or could have expected, and comes out as a good piece of work.
Yes.
You have the elation of the making, but there's always, again, this is just to do with the rhythms of the body and the mind. You then sink down and you think, oh, I'll never do that again. That's the last great thing I've ever written. You know, I'm never going to live up to that, you know, and then you have to just wait in that space and see if something else comes along, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's also Simone Weil's attending, right? Just be
attending.
Awake. Just be awake.
Attending. You know, attending is such an interesting word as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
let me tell you guys a story. So years ago, this is just because we're on there.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a dream or a waking dream. I'm not even quite sure if I was awake, but in this dream, I found myself hovering over a body of dark, broiling water, just eternal, just this, you know, and it was maybe 10 miles above, just hovering, and the air was incredibly moist. It was almost to the degree that it was not easy to see almost the difference between the air and the surface of the water. The moisture in the air was so dense. And this is and below me was this massive bird, enormous bird hovering over the water. So obviously, you know where I am. And I hear this voice saying, in the beginning, the spirit hovered over the deep. And I'm in this dream, I'm kind of going, okay, I know where I am. And I was afraid of this bird because I'm like, the bird is down and I'm kind of behind his head and I don't want it to see me. I'm quite terrified of the bird, but it's, and then out of the side of my peripheral vision, I started seeing these little flitters of light. And at first I thought they were butterflies that were catching light, although there was no source of light for that to happen. And as it flew, they was generating a tone, a note, a musical note, but it wasn't like C or G or E flat. It was the essence of them. I don't know how else to describe it. And then another little butterfly note came in, another bit of butterfly note, and they started finding each other and forming melodies. As they formed melodies, they started spinning. And as more and more came in, by first the tens and then the hundreds and the tens of thousands and the millions, it developed like a cyclone of symphonic something, like bigger than anything I can't even describe the enormity of it. And as I'm watching this thing and the beauty of the I'm just weeping because I know I'm asleep. I know that when I wake up, I'll never be able to describe this to anybody. And so I'm already in grief over
because of that,
over the loss, you know. And I'm thinking, like I shouldn't be here. Mike Jansen should be here, like someone that can dictate this, someone that has the musical capacity to take this down. So I'm sobbing, and then all of a sudden, this cyclone of music started shooting off galaxies, just spitting them off into, you know, distant space. And so I'm sort of, in a sense, witnessing the dawn of creation. And as I'm sobbing and weeping, this voice says to me, if you will attend to me, I'll give you some of this. And then 3 times, attend. And I will,
wow.
You know, and I'm just, but
that's fabulous.
But I mean, it wasn't like memorize, you know, the Beatitudes. It was just attend. The word was attend.
Attend. Yeah, no, that's very beautiful. I mean, if you were saying about you're almost grieving in the dream for the moment when you're awake and you won't, you know, there's a great line of Eliot's about that, about in the Four Quartets, about when you've had one of these moments of complete integrated vision.
Right.
And he says, ridiculous, the waste sad time stretching before and after.
That's great.
Yes. But there are hints of better goods to come that we cannot yet name, but they're there. And with my caterpillar imagination, and then I've had certain dreams like that you're describing, Steve, in which as I'm waking up, though, I cannot, because my conscious mind is not able to grasp what the unconscious is able to do.
Right.
I get duller and duller, and I'm not able to communicate it because the symbolic content, but it's a hint of a mind, a resurrected mind whose capacity will be so capacious, so rich, so wonderful. And then that amplified by the communion and union of other resurrected saints who no longer know death and sin or anything of whatever we choose to do will be pleasing to God because we have been purged and purified and perfected. And all that richness of biblical imagery is the only vision of a flourishing life that makes sense out of a world of apparent darkness and emptiness.
Yeah. Just going back to the metamorphosis metaphor.
Yes.
The making of, if you like, the chrysalis and so on.
Yes.
Again, I'm sorry, I keep going back to Coleridge. I'm a bit soaked in him. But he's got a really interesting bit in the biography. He was a very, very close observer of nature. He paid attention to, little water beetles on the surface of a stream, and he compared the but he's got a great bit when he's talking about the imagination as what he calls the sacred power of self-intuition. And he zooms in and he talks about how, I don't know which insect he's talking, he calls it the horned fly. And he says, the horned fly, before it metamorphoses, and this is exact words, he says, leaves room in its involucrum for antennae yet to come. So he's saying the shape of the chrysalis includes holding open and protecting a space into which the antennae will grow. Yes. Now, what Coleridge says is, he says that's kind of what the arts in a baptized image should do for us, that artists are holding open a space into which our knowledge will grow, because the antennae are obviously the means whereby the little creature knows the world, but that space into which they grow has got to be held for them. And I think often what happens when human creativity under the image of God is working at a deep level is that we intuit a shape whose meaning and purpose we ourselves don't yet understand.
That's correct.
But we know it's right. We often know it's right because it's beautiful.
Yes.
But we ourselves couldn't give you a full explanation of what it is, because we ourselves haven't yet grown the antennae into the shape that it.
That's so helpful, because even in my own process, I have a very, very hard time articulating what I know.
Yes.
And I haven't done scholarly work, and I haven't got all those kinds of chops, but I just there's something like you just again, because it's beautiful, because it's gift, and your history of looking back over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years bears out that yes, your artistic intelligence or antennae themselves or whatever did know at least enough to create the space, even if you didn't know what would fill it.
Yeah, exactly, and to hold it. Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting, the thing about because it's beautiful, that goes back to the opening of our discussion about beauty.
Yeah. Yes.
I remember talking to the great scientist, cosmologist Sir John Polkinghorne, who's also an Anglican priest, and he was talking about beauty in science and mathematics. And he said it is simply the case that the more elegant the solution to an equation is, the more likely it is to be right.
Yes.
That scientists and mathematicians respond to beauty.
Yes.
And there are lots and lots of ways of solving the same set of, as it were, kind of algebraic possibilities.
Yes.
But the beautiful one turns out to be the best one, the closest one.
And it would make sense if the author of that which is true and which is beautiful is going to inform us, and the author of that which is true, and we resonate with that truth. But then the sense of, and then the goodness. I think of three forms of beauty. I think of created beauty, which is I'm particularly keen on helping people envision, and using science and technology as a force multiplier for a sense of worship and awe, which is a lovely thing, because it's intriguing to me that God waited, as it were, until the so-called Enlightenment, for the invention of the microscope and the macroscope, basically in the 17th century. It was there that the microscope and the telescope were developed. In other words, just as we're about to transition from a theistic consensus to a more and more of a materialistic, physicalistic, diminished vision of life that is so ugly and manifests itself with the implications of the things that you talk about in Mariner. I've just been read your wonderful overview of this, and this whole idea of the loneliness of our culture and the diminishments because of the digitization and social media, where people are no longer authentic selves, but rather it actually encourages preening and posing and posturing and positioning. So they have thousands of friends and no relationships. And so at the end of the day, there is no connectedness with but it's intriguing and ironic to me that just as he sees we're going to be doing it, it'd be too much of a cognitive dissonance for us to go from a theistic vision to a materialist, physicalist. So by way of deism, it was kind of like a transitional point to diminish cognitive dissonance. But that's at that very point, the delicious irony is that God says, let me now use your own science. I'm going to reveal stuff to you that you had no idea existed before. I'm going to reveal you a whole microcosm of wonders and marvels. And you don't understand a thing. I look at a leaf. I don't understand a leaf, let alone an insect or a butterfly or a bird. But even a cell, I can't grasp. So if I can't understand, we're gardeners of mystery. And everything that's in this realm is mysterious beyond our comprehension, but they're pointers in my mind to greater truths whose apprehension we will be more capable of embracing because of the glory of the resurrected consciousness that we will now encounter. And even our sensorium, they'll all be amplified radically. Imagine being able to see the infrared or the ultraviolet. You'll see new primary colors and so forth. So I'm looking with growing anticipation in that, but using the beauty that we've now got and using, as I say, science as a force multiplier for worship and awe on the microcosm, the midicosm, and the macrocosm. So it's a great time to live in that.
I agree with that. I mean, that's why this whole notion of a quarrel between science and faith is kind of absurd.
It is.
Partly because we wouldn't have science if we hadn't had faith in the first place.
It required that to have it in the first place. Yeah.
The only reason for asking of the world what its order and beauty is and investigating it is the idea that it has some order, and that idea is to do with creation and the logos. So
that's correct.
So yeah, I see that entirely. But you're talking about we're making this transition into materialism. I'm not quite so pessimistic. I think already the project of completely reductive materialism, that particular paradigm, if you like, is breaking up on every side.
Yes.
Because for a start, in brain science, people just cannot find consciousness, as it were. You can't generate an ought from an is, as
that's correct.
Said a long time ago.
Yes.
And I think there's a fantastic essay by Owen Barfield, published in the late 70s, I think, called The Coming Trauma of Materialism, in which he points out, and he says this is very interesting. He's citing Kuhn's book on the structure of scientific revolutions.
Yes.
And talking about how just before a massive paradigm shift, there's a desperate attempt to prop up the old model. And the old astronomy, the still geocentric astronomy, was producing reasonable results. I mean, it predicted sunrise and sunset. But when the movement of the stars didn't quite work, they kept on saying, "Oh, this is an ellipsis, or this is a, they kept on trying until eventually, Copernicus comes along and says, "Well, hear me out. What if the sun's in the middle and we're going round?" And suddenly, then the maths works, But it takes a long time. I mean, for people to get what a massive shift that is. I mean, linguistically, we still don't get it. I mean, properly speaking, we ought to speak of earth turn rather than of sunset. But we ought to think we're hurling backwards and this, but we don't. We still speak with the language of the old metaphors. So I think actually, because I think materialism, reductive materialism, is in fact not the case.
Yes.
And it can't account for consciousness, and it can't account for love.
Right. That's why there's this paradigm shift, the structure of scientific
I think we are going to have a further paradigm. I think the paradigm shift will come, in which the materialist paradigm will collapse. Now, the real question is what happens then? I mean, that could be a great moment for a recovery of faith and for a sharing of the gospel. Or it could lead to the inrush of every kind of dark mythological fantasy that anybody wanted, and it could be simply panpsychism or whatever. So I think there's a real moment where we need Christians at the cutting edge of those who are going to make those paradigm shifts.
Yes.
To bring the wisdom of theology to bear on all of that.
Yes, it's what Lewis called the materialist magician. And the whole idea is when you break away from one, there's this downward pull that's tethering us to an earthbound grasp of how things must be. So you then take this irrational leap of faith into an irrational realm of panpsychism or some panentheism or something like that, because
panpsychism seems to be there are quite a few serious sober neuroscientists who seem
people don't want ultimate reality to be personal, because if ultimate reality is personal, then we're accountable, and therein lies
that's exactly what it's about. I mean, this goes back to that. I mean, the fundamental watchword of the Enlightenment, as from Kant, is autonomy. It's autonomos, self-law.
Autonomy. That's
the reason why everybody's still trying desperately to defend it is it gives us this fleeting idea that we're utterly independent makers of our own law.
Yeah.
And as soon as we admit we're in relationship, and one of those relationships is with a great God who created and redeemed us, then that calls not only for reverence and awe, but also for obedience. And obedience runs clean contrary to the mantra of autonomos.
That is correct.
I mean, we're seeing the very sharp edge of this right now.
Yes.
In my own country, because after a mere 5 hours of debate, our parliament has just voted to pursue the possibility or to bring into action a law which would be so-called assisted dying. I mean, it's actually assisted suicide, in which the state will become a funder and minister of death.
Yes.
In the name of the autonomy.
Yes.
Of everybody's choices. But of course, as always happens, there won't really be autonomy, because people, of my generation will then feel under all kinds of social pressure.
Yes.
Not to be a burden on society and not to be a burden on our relatives. And a fundamental shift is happening and all of that is driven by the mantra of autonomy.
Yes,
if we actually had grace, reverence, and obedience, we wouldn't even be thinking these thoughts.
No. It's the fundamental question of the fall again. So the autonomous quest for my own self. It's basically the fundamental message in Scripture is I'm God and you're not. But we don't want to submit to that notion.
But of course, the irony is that everything, Thomas Aquinas says and Augustine says this too, that basically a person who's apparently desiring evil is really desiring some fragment of good in that evil, but preferring it to the wholeness of good. So they have a disordered love. That's what he says. Now, autonomy, there is something of God and of God's gift in autonomy as an idea, because he's given us freedom and he's made us free, and he's come that we may have life fully. And the paradox is that the service of Christ is perfect freedom.
That's only in his
when
service.
We obey God, actually what happens is we become completely the person he wants us to be, and therefore have this amazing freedom for. Now, I may not have freedom from certain things, and I have to have ethical codes that I try to follow.
Yes.
But in doing that, I become a person who is more free as a person.
You become more
free. So if
free,
God is effectively telling me not to get addicted to things,
yes,
he's actually doing that. I surrender my autonomy to God's lesson and say, I won't get addicted to this. But in not getting addicted, I'm actually preserving my freedom and autonomy in the other sense.
Yes,
I'm just gonna.
It becomes a self-defeating process. It's a self-defeating process at the end of the day, in which we have to lose our lives to find His life. It's the pathway of downward mobility, and except a grain of wheat fall into the ground and die. It remains by itself.
Yeah, that's one of the poems one of the sayings. I don't know if I've got it here. It's one of the sayings I write about in my parable, and that's another book that I thought might be relevant to our weekend in the Museum of the Bible, actually, or our 2 days. Is I wrote this book, a collection of poetry called Parable and Paradox, which contains 50 sonnets on the sayings of Jesus.
On that,
where essentially I was trying to sit at the feet of Jesus and kind of hear it all again. And obviously one of the ones I went for was precisely that, you know,
the
unless a
losing
grain
of
of wheat
oneself to
falls
find
into
one's true self.
Yeah, I'll just see if I can find it. Here, a grain of wheat. So
Yes.
I'm responding to John 12:24.
Yes.
Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. So it's a kind of prayer to Jesus, and it goes like this. Oh, let me fall as grain to the good earth and die away from all dry separation. Die to my soul self and find new birth within that very death, a dark fruition deep in this crowded underground, to learn the earthy otherness of every other, to know that nothing is achieved alone, but only where these other fallen gather. If I bear fruit and break through to bright air, then fall upon me with your freeing flail to shuck this husk and leave me sheer and clear as heaven-handled Hopkins, that my fall may be more fruitful and my autumn still a golden evening where your barns are full.
Sure.
But the die away from my soul self,
yes. All of nature is replete with that image, isn't it, of death that leads ultimately to resurrection, a kind of an anastasis. Yeah. It's all wired hard into the realm of the world, but we can't see it unless we have a new, fresh eyes and biblical eyes, and to see through the vision of the Logos. But to discover that we'll never be free by trying to become autonomous, but we find our freedom in losing ourselves and finding himself in our lives, so that mutuality becomes an expression of growing intimacy.
But in fact, what follows from that is true freedom. You know,
true
so
freedom.
It's not the gospel is not one of servitude, but of
it's significant that freedom. Jesus never invites us to give up something without offering us a better good.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean that's the nature. That's actually also how his heavenly Father is with him. If you look at the three temptations,
yes,
for example, in the wilderness, you can see that each of them is a foreshortened, twisted, slightly shoddy form of something that God already has in mind for Jesus.
Yes.
So the devil says to him, turn these stones into bread, which he would have done privately for the satisfaction of his own hunger. And he says, no, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth from the mouth of God. And then in that very same wilderness, because he said that no, God says this enormous yes. And he takes the 5 loaves and the 2 small fishes and he feeds 5,000. It's not like God was saying, I don't want you to make and share bread. Boy, have I got bread for you. But not here, not now. So you can then do it.
Yes.
You know, and that's true, I think, of the other temptations too. I mean,
I think that's quite so. It's all 3 of those realms. And so the submission and the profound pain of loss is to really finding your true self in losing the false self. And so discovering that vitality that we were meant for by pursuing the one thing, the pearl of great price, the treasure hidden in the field, and the thing that's most needful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, this is good, and I greatly enjoyed our time together, and look forward to what the Lord's got in store for us. And so you'll be kind of having a creative synergy, which I'm going to enjoy seeing.
Yeah, we'll enjoy doing that. I always relish the times when Steve and I get to do something like this together, because it's always renewing for both.
It's going to be renewing,
yeah, and we're also quite malleable and quick to change direction if it's called upon. So
yeah. We'll have to see what's about it. But I think I think the museum, having been around the Museum of the Bible, I think it's a great context for us to do what we do. Yes. Obviously, because a lot of what we do is drawn from Scripture.
Yeah.
But also because, as I say, the thing that struck me, I mean, perhaps this is true of a lot of museums now. Museums aren't the dull places that they were when I was a kid, where you just walk past a series of glass cases with incredibly small labels on them, which were usually too high for you as a child to see anyway. I mean, clearly it's this immersive experience and all kinds of things. There was this thing where I love that thing where you sit, as it were, in this kind of immersive theatre and you fly over Washington and see all the different crosses and Christian monuments.
Isn't that lovely? Yes, you've seen that. Yeah, it's a great experience. So leveraging that kind of technology, though, to enhance our imagination for better things to come and better possibilities, the whole concept of a baptized imagination and being able to see beyond what is visible to that which is unseen, and having that vision of beauty and truth and goodness that we all long for, but we can never find without losing our lives to find His.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I had no idea what we were up for in this, but it's been
it's fun. Nice. It's one of those great gifts.
Yeah.
Thank you for being a part of the Explorers podcast. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.